Paul Brunton's Spiritual Essentials. What are the spiritual long and short paths? Quest Series 3, Video 16. Presented by the Paul Brunton Philosophic Foundation. It would be wonderful if everyone, everywhere, could slip so easily into the kingdom of heaven and just as easily stay there forever. But alas, the facts of human nature forbid it. People require teaching, training, purifying, disciplining, and preparing before they can do so. And the course needed is a lifetime's, the work needed much and varied. That is why the long path is needed. The long path is taught to beginners and others in the earlier and middle stages of the quest. This is because they are ready for the idea of self-improvement and not for the higher one taught on the short path, where attention is turned away from the little self and from the idea of perfecting it to the essence, the real being. This discipline cures the emotional nature of its faults, purifies the intellectual nature of its prejudices, cleanses the egoistic nature of its resistances. Thus it brings the mind into a state where it may understand truth without error and with clarity. If the grace of the Overself, that is our soul, is to take hold of us, no part of us ought to offer resistance. This is why a preparation for the event is needed, a process of taking out of us those things which are certain to instigate such resistance. In other words, the activity of the long path is necessary to the successful treading of the short path. A student comment.
My interview with PB was about the short path and the long path. I asked, although trying very hard to relinquish my personal will, I still find myself operating from a selfish state of consciousness without compassion. What advice can you give me? He said, your question has two parts, the selfish attitude and the personal will. You are a self, a glorious self, an unfolding flower, like a seed of a tree that has everything within it. Through birth, infancy, adolescence, adulthood, you're constantly developing. You're developing physically, mentally, emotionally, spiritually. What brought you to this point of asking these questions? Your development. This is the long path religious attitude, to do battle with yourself, to pit one part of yourself against another, the lower will against the higher. From this religious attitude, you will grow into a mystical attitude, and then another by using the short path.
The changeover to the short path does not entirely cancel out your long path work, but affects it in three ways. First, it reduces the labors and disciplines involved. Second, the reduced work is done without anxiety and without tension. Third, it frees you from the excessive sense of self-responsibility for your inner and outer life. That is, from excessive ego depending. A student comment.
PB told me that on the short path, one ignores negativity and turns 180 degrees away from the ego to the Overself. Things will become brighter and brighter. The short path will establish you in peace more and more. The work of the long path eventually brings the grace, which then puts you on the short path. The short path is shorter in time, for you turn and face your goal directly. And, because of the pressures of these times, it is recommended that both paths be done together rather than just the long, in order to help circumvent obstacles.
Why should the short path be a better means of getting grace than the long one? There is not only the reason that it is not occupied with the ego, but also that it continually keeps up remembrance of the overself. It does this with a heart that gives and is open to receive love. It thinks of the overself throughout the day. Thus, it not only comes closer to the source from which grace is being perpetually radiated, but it also is repeatedly inviting grace with each loving remembrance. The loving, adoring recollection of the overself, the constant return to memory of it amid the world's distractions, the reiteration of this divine thought as a permanent background to all other thinking, is itself a yoga path. Indeed, it is the same as that taught by St. Paul when he wrote, "Pray without ceasing," and "Bring every thought into captivity to Jesus Christ." The as-if is another valuable short path practice. It is to see oneself as already enjoying the realization of the goal, already partaking of its glorious rewards. It is to be done as many times every day as you can remember to do it. You pretend to be what you aim to become. You think, speak, act, and behave as a master of emotion, desire, and ego, because you want to be a master. But you should play this game for and to yourself alone, not to enlarge yourself in others' eyes, lest you sow the seed of a great vanity. The danger of becoming too self-centered exists on the long path, but the danger of deifying the self exists on the short one. Practicing this as-if exercise is like being spiritually reborn and finding a new way of life. It gives courage to those who feel grievously inadequate, hope to those who feel hooked by their past failures. It is not merely pretense or make-believe. It requires penetrative study and sufficient understanding of the high character and spiritual consciousness in the part to be played, the role to be enacted, the auto-suggestion to be realized. You learn that you set your own limits, that so long as you think all day that you are only this person doing and speaking in the ordinary way what people usually do, then you are creating a self-limitation. But if you start the day on a higher level, thinking that you are divine in your inmost being, and keep on that level as the hours pass, then you will feel closer to it. This is a practical procedure, one which has its effect on consciousness, on character, and on events. The short path is not concerned with time, and therefore not with progress. You live in the sunlight because you live in truth, the only reality. Be still and know that I am God is the key to the enigma of truth, for it sums up the whole of the short path. The basis of the short path is that we are always divine. It is with us already. It is no new thing, and we only have to recognize what is already here. Paul Brunton, 1898 to 1981, a best-selling British author of a dozen books, spent much of his early life researching the original sacred teachings of Western and Eastern spiritual traditions. He traveled the world to discover and communicate with Christian, Kabbalistic, Vedantic, Buddhist, Taoist, indigenous, and Sufi masters. Blending the richness of his own spiritual experience and inquiry with these ancient and contemporary teachings, he developed a philosophy and path of practice that suits life in the 21st century, one that expresses the greatest wisdom and love available to humankind. Regardless of how it is named, we each have a divine soul, an overself or higher self, that is with us here and now, waiting to be realized. Paul Brunton's writings are a source of deep spiritual guidance for all those interested in living a divinely inspired life. Anthony Damiani, 1922 to 1984, was a prominent teacher of Paul Brunton's ideas and founder of the Wisdom's Goldenrod Center for Philosophic Studies. Inspired to penetrate into and understand the depths of traditional wisdom, he taught classes on the major philosophies as well as the teachings of Paul Brunton. His dedicated students compiled the 16 volumes of Paul Brunton's posthumous writings, titled The Notebooks of Paul Brunton, available from www.larsonpublications.com. The quotes for this video are taken from the following: The Notebooks of Paul Brunton, Volume 3, Practices for the Quest, Volume 14, Inspiration and the Overself, and Volume 15, Advanced Contemplation. Paul Brunton Foundation Videos, Quest Series 1, The Wisdom of Paul Brunton, 7 videos. Quest Series 2, Paul Brunton Answers Life's Perennial Questions, 5 videos. Quest Series 3, Paul Brunton's Spiritual Essentials, is open-ended, and new videos will continue to be added to those listed below. Please subscribe.